I'm personally very excited for this next 90-minute interactive workshop presented by Paul Silva and Kelly Minton of Innovation Accelerator. A lot of syllables there. Today, they're going to ask us to think about everything that could possibly go wrong and give us some tools to plan for the future and address the challenges of this time. So I think this is a great topic, and I'm excited that we were able to get them. Paul is the founder of Innovation Accelerator and a lifelong entrepreneur and educator, passionate about helping people and teams create economic prosperity through innovation. And who doesn't love economic prosperity? Personally, co-founder and director of operations, Kelly Minton, brings experience from both the for-profit and nonprofit sectors. So she knows all about things that we know about, like traditional fundraising and board governance. So we have a great duo ready to go and help us with some techniques to help our organizations avoid failure. So Innovation Accelerator Premortem, take it away, you guys.
Liana, thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Again, I would like to thank Liana and her team for inviting us to be with you all here today. As she said, my name is Kelly Minton, and joining me is my partner and co-founder, Paul Silva. So she gave us a wonderful introduction about Innovation Accelerator. Just want to say that we are proud that our flagship trainings, top alumni, which are all nonprofit organizations, have raised hundreds of thousands of dollars in seed funding for new programs that will threaten to bring lots of money into their organizations and by way of unrestricted dollars. So today we are looking forward to introducing you to a premortem technique, which is to help you identify problems before it's too late. As Liana said, this session is meant to be interactive. So we're gonna be calling on you and asking you to share your thoughts and observations with us as we go through this. I'm gonna be sharing my screen during most of the presentation. If you're sitting at your desk, you will need to have a pen and a piece of paper. I did notice in the last session that some folks were outside, which is absolutely fantastic. It is a gorgeous day to be outside. So if you are outside and enjoying the sunshine, if you could just be thinking as we're going through things that you might like to share with us, that would be great. So I will have the chat window open, and I know that PJ and Elizabeth are behind the scenes helping things go. So they'll be helping to promote people if you raise your hand with a question, but I will also have access to chat so I can help answer questions as well. And at the very end of the workshop, in the chat text section, I will be sharing a link with you that is our contact page. So if you would like a free copy of the premortem worksheet that we are about to walk you through, I encourage you all to be in touch and let us know. And I believe that that is all for me. So I'm going to hand the baton over to Mr. Silva, and he is going to take it away and walk us through this wonderful workshop. Thank you.
Why, thank you very kindly, Kelly. Happy day all. It is a delight with you here. I am formal. I am dressed in a suit and tie, but it's Garfield, so don't worry too much. So we talked a bit about, and I want to thank everyone for having us here and for the full introductions you gave. You take a bunch of the things to say out, which I appreciate. Kelly and I are lifelong innovators and educators. In particular, my first startup made video games that help the blind interact with their fully sighted friends and family, hunt handicapped and as equals. And since then, I've had the joy of launching many businesses, the joy and the terror of launching many businesses, nonprofit and for-profit, having a bunch of failures and successes that together have taught me a great deal about what works. I've also had the incredible privilege of being an educator, of training just about 1,000 entrepreneurs who collectively have launched enough businesses that they are together the 15th largest employer in the Pioneer Valley. And they vary from a battered wife who figured out how to create her own business and be safe and independent, and is now running a franchise delivering hot cookies to people who need hot cookies, to some scientists who have genetically engineered bacteria that crawl inside tumor cells and kill them from the inside. Awesome. They're the people doing the real work. Kelly and I have the great fun of being the people at the beginning of their journey to direct them in the right place. And that, in fact, was the inspiration for us creating Innovation Accelerator a couple of years ago. You people in the nonprofit sector are doing some of the most important work in the world. Yet the most advanced techniques for innovation and adaptation are, they're in Silicon Valley, they're in the startup world, and they don't seem to make it all the way to you as quickly as they should. And who needs these tools more than you? And so that's what excited us, as a chance to bring those. And we'll be working through one of those tools with you here today. And to get things started, I want to think about, you know, it's a little crazy out there. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, right? If it's a once in a lifetime experience that we're going through. The last time the world changed this much was when my 90-year-old grandmother was a teenager. And with great change comes great peril and great opportunity. And it's our job as leaders to identify, be clear-eyed about the risks so we can chart our organization's path to, again, as our past speaker, get to the other end of the smile. Right? How can we make sure that we can thrive and survive and do what we want to do even better as we come out? Now, I like to think of this by way of analogy as to when the Ice Age ended, right? These giant glaciers melted and moved away, and it opened up all this fertile land, all these new environments that previously had been barren wastelands. And a bunch of species adapted. There's one species that I bet you everyone on this webinar is pretty fond of called humans. We humans really enjoyed the Ice Age ending because the ice was rated. Now, it wasn't so good for the woolly mammoths and the saber-toothed. So it's our job to understand opportunities and the risks being created by the events that we're all in. So let's jump in and talk about our pre-mortem activity today. So a pre-mortem is a powerful tool for helping you avoid problems before they happen. You've probably done a post-mortem before. The post, as it implies, is what you do at the end. So you finish the project, you sit down, you go, what went right, what went wrong, how do we do it better? If you don't do it at the end of every project, I strongly recommend you do it. It's an invaluable tool. A pre-mortem is spiritually related, except instead of waiting for the project to end, you do it at the beginning. But you imagine that the project has failed, and failed in truly spectacular fashion. And by giving yourself permission to have some fun of doing this mental trick of imagining project failure and having fun with it, you do all that does is it opens up your brain to identify causes of failure that in a normal project planning process are almost always missed. We like it so much. It's one of our favorite tools in the toolbox. Today, we're going to give you the speed version through our introduce. You'll see the tool we use. You'll be able to take this tool home with you, so to speak. You're already at home. You'll be able to download it and use it at your organizations tomorrow if you like. So let's pull up our sample, Kelly, and get them started.
Sounds
and while she's pulling that up, I'll walk you through. The first thing you do before a pre-mortem is you got to decide what's the project that we're going to do. What is the project we're imagining the end of? And for all of you, I recommend you just think about where you are in your organization. If you're the CEO, then you probably want to think about, well, it's my organization. I want to make sure my organization is doing really well in a couple of years' time. If you are a program manager, then imagine your program. And if you are someone who is starting projects, then I want you to just imagine I'm going to start a new project. So just think about, for whatever that is, I'm just going to call that the effort that you're doing. And once you have identified the effort, you do 4 more steps. First, you understand the environment that you're operating in. Then you go to Pity City. You imagine the abject failure, and that's where you get to have the most fun. Then you identify the root causes of the problem. And finally, you come up with preventative strategies you can use. And we're going to walk through all of that. We're going to give you an example, and we're going to have you do it at home with your favorite paper, computer technology, whatever you want to do, you can follow along at home. All right, so let's go to our next page and get things started. All right, so for the example one that we're going to walk you through, we're actually going to use a client, unnamed, but a client we had a great deal of fun working with over the years. They're a medium-sized nonprofit, a couple hundred employees. And their CEO wanted to make sure, given all the things I just described about COVID, that their organization was going to come out the other side. I want to make sure that everyone's thinking about the existential risk that COVID presents to their organization. So the scope is the entire organization. and the time frame, 2 years. That seemed like about the right amount of time that they could plan ahead for, that they could impose impact. All right. So at home on pieces of paper, you should write down what's the is it your whole organization, is your project? So please write that down. And next, write down how far your organization. It's probably like 2 years. If it's on the other end of the spectrum, a project that you're running, it's probably like. Okay, now we get into the meat of it. Step one, let's describe the environment. I'd like you to make 2 columns on your sheet of paper, threats and opportunities. Now, when you describe your environment, what you want to do is understand the external stuff, not the things in the organization. So this nonprofit we were working with, because we were working with the entire nonprofit, that was the effort that we were analyzing, they had about the outside world. So the threats that they were dealing with, I bet you these are going to be the same threats for y'all, and I actually recommend that you just sort of use them for the rest of the exercise. But you can imagine painting it, right? So the experts say we're probably not going to have a vaccine or significant treatment for a couple of years' time. We hope that it comes sooner, but this is a pre-mortem. We're assuming the worst. So no vaccine for years, social distancing for years, periods of re-quarantine, kids sent home from school, a major recession, which means dramatically less tax revenue, which means the state agencies that fund a lot of nonprofits have a lot less money to give out. Are we depressed yet? Okay, right. So that's some of the threats, and I think we've got enough there. But on the opportunity side, all right, what kind of things are going on here? Well, COVID-19 has forced everyone to get a whole lot more comfortable with remote meetings and events, like we are all doing here, right? Previously, we'd have a hard time imagining doing an event like this and having people actually show up, because it just had to be there in person. But once everyone gets comfortable with virtual, they discover that driving kind of stinks. So there's a bunch of advantages to this. People are comfortable with it, especially to you folks and us. Pioneer Valley and the Berkshires, compared to most of the country, we are rural, right? And so if we have discovered that much of the country is excited about the internet and is now willing to do on remote meetings, and there's something that you can do exceptionally well, you have the opportunity to serve people outside of a reasonable driving radius. And that might mean you can attract funders from outside of the immediate area. So there's a lot of interesting opportunities that are available to people. So I think that's a good covering of the landscape. Let's take a look at our next section, where we actually going to let you start having fun and really writing things down. Ah, yes, we're going to go to Pity City. My dear mentor is the one who named it this, and it helps set the tone properly. All right, so again, I want you to imagine abject, absolute failure. If you haven't figured out how to put the CEO of your organization behind bars, you're not trying hard. And in fact, with the organization that we worked with, that was definitely what happened. They had several senior leadership behind bars at the end. They had some constituents that they serve and their families chaining themselves to the Capitol building in protest for how coldly they had failed and not served that community. And you get the idea. And of course, all the hundreds of people that worked there lost their jobs. Many of them weren't able to get new jobs because they were associated with that terrible nonprofit that did all those, that failed so spectacularly. You get the idea. So you can see we've got some leading questions. More, I think we can get all the questions on the screen. So these are some leading questions. You think about it, and I'd like you all to take 2 minutes to, on your own, read these questions and just jot down the Pity City video for the effort that you have selected. And just when you think you've gotten as dark as you can, try to challenge yourself. Your mission. How dark can you get? Okay, I've got it on your marks. Get set. Go. got about a minute left. And at the end of that time, we're going to be asking for people to sort of raise their hands and share some if you've got a great sense of humor. All right, we are at time. So I would love it if anyone that would like to share what they have or has some questions to help them understand how they might do this better with their organization, with their leadership, can use the raise hand interface and let us know you have a question, or feel free to throw something into chat. Because we don't like lecturing at people all day. We would much rather talk with real people about the actual challenges that they're having at their organizations and how they overcome them.
So Paul, we do have one question. Can we talk about how we get organizational buy-in to face and discuss what could go wrong?
Oh, that's a great question. Thank you. So, so the way we're doing it right now is sort of set up for you to do it by yourself. But when we do a facilitated session, and what I would recommend you do, whether you had us helping you or not, is that you help everyone understand this is the framework, and everyone gets a copy of this piece of paper, and everyone writes on it, or Google Doc, pick your favorite technology. If you're doing it on Zoom, we use a virtual whiteboard solution ourselves. And if you just empower everyone and say, this is the question, now write the answers, what we have discovered is people are a little hesitant at the very beginning. And so it's really important to sell them on the idea that we're not planning for failure, people. We are planning to avoid failure. This is something so that we can make sure that we do not have this terrible thing happen. Because they're sort of used to, oh, you're going to tell me that we have to do layoffs. And so this is a strategy all about how many people are going to lose their jobs. No, that is not here. We are trying to understand what is the risks, and then what can we do about it today so that we don't have to lay people off, so that we can actually do a better job. And once they get over that initial discomfort, then having them go through the activity is very powerful, because, you know, part of the reason we were brought into that organization, at the end of it, there wasn't much of anything said that the CEO didn't believe. The CEO's concern wasn't that he didn't believe it. His concern was that his senior staff didn't believe it yet. And if he told them, he could tell that they weren't going to believe it. So what this process does is we set the stage and ask the questions, and then everyone answers, and then you ask people to share their answers, and lo and behold, they convince themselves pretty effectively of what the problem really is. So they came into the meeting hostile to the whole concept, fairly confident that, look, in a couple months, this thing's all going to be over and everything's going to go back to normal. By the end of it, they're like, oh my God, we're dead if we don't do something serious, but we are really well equipped to do something. And if we do it right, we can be a much stronger organization. Let's roll up our sleeves and do it. The energy level at the end of the meeting was truly impressive. So those are the techniques we found that helpful. Did we address your question? Okay, yes. Excellent. I don't see any other questions, so I think we might proceed to our, oh, well, actually, I'm going to elaborate and give people a few more answers, and then we'll move on to our next one. So what happened to you personally? All right, so the people filling it in, as a general rule, realized that they were out of a job, that they were not going to be able to get jobs. Some of them, you know, were behind bars. Again, not because any of them were trying to do anything illegal, but because when an organization is in disaster mode, sometimes people make expedient choices. Again, not trying to do the wrong thing, but they're under such pressure that they either miss things that make them out of compliance that looks bad and gets them in trouble, or they're under so much pressure that they make a bad decision. Again, not trying to be evil, but ending up doing something wrong. And so just don't put people in that position in the first place. So, and of course, what happened to the people that they served? Well, there are thousands upon thousands of people that this organization helps lead better lives. And those people were going to lose this organization's ability to do that if they failed in this spectacular fashion. And that's an important motivating factor, because those of us that are in the nonprofit sector, right, we're not in this for money, we're in this for impact. And so losing your job is definitely important. People care about their job because they got to feed their families, but losing your job and screwing over all the people that you're trying to serve, that was a powerful motivator for all of them to internalize. And they realized that this would probably have broader effects on all the partners that they work with. There are a lot of corporations that work with them to serve that population, and maybe that those corporations would be turned off from ever working with that population, how bad they did it. So you see, like, it was good. I mean, we just would go to the next person, like, I want darker, I want darker, I want darker, and they delivered. So that's what you want to look at. All right, let's head on to the next section where we identify root. All right, so we use, so we got to understand, why did this pitiful situation come to be? And we use a methodology known as 5 whys. Some of you are probably familiar with it. For those of you that aren't, we all know there's a difference between symptoms and causes. But it's easy to say and hard to do to figure out how to go from a symptom to a cause. One of the best techniques, especially because it's so elegantly simple, is to channel your inner 2-year-old and say, why? Why? So what we would love for you to do is make a couple columns on your piece of paper and think about that pitiful situation you described. And in the left-hand column, just write down all the reasons you think that you failed, why you achieved that pitiful situation. And after you've written all those things, you go back to each one and you ask yourself the question, why did that happen? And you write the answer to that. So you can see in this example here that Kelly has, right? So the example is that they couldn't get their funding renewed. That was the they had this pitiful situation. Why did they have it? Because they couldn't get their funding renewed from the state. Why? Well, the state agency had less money, and also a rival organization got the money instead of them. So there were 2 answers. Okay, let's follow that chain down. Your inner 2-year-old goes, why? I know, because my 6-year-old still likes to do it. So the state agency had money because, why? Because the agency didn't have as much political power. Why did political power? The legislature lowered funding. Why did they lower funding? Because there's less tax revenue. Why? Because of COVID-19. Okay, well, that's a very different thing than what we wrote at the beginning. Now let's look at the other chain where we said rival organization got the money instead of us. Why did that happen? Well, the rival was more cost effective at delivering the solution. Why was that? Well, we tripled our costs and somehow they were able to lower their costs. That sounds impossible. Why was that? Well, we tripled our costs because of social distancing, right? In order to keep doing the same thing, we needed more trucks, we needed more teachers, more shifts, more classroom space. That obviously costs more money. Whereas they decided to use the time that all their people were in quarantine to learn new technologies to figure out how to do those things remotely. So they got rid of the trucks, they got rid of the classrooms, and they didn't have to put on extra shifts. And so they did more with less. And why were they able to do that and we weren't? Well, because our culture doesn't prioritize learning technology. And so we didn't think outside the box. Now look at that thing. That our culture doesn't prioritize learning technology and thinking outside the box. That is radically different than we couldn't get the funding renewed. If you think that couldn't get the funding renewed is the root cause, then you're going to think all about how do I lobby my congressperson? How do I make sure I've got a great relationship with a person in the government? Which I'm not saying that isn't important, it is, but I'm just saying that was a symptom. The real problem, it doesn't matter how good your relationship is with that person, they don't have enough money to give away. So in this situation, you need to have a dramatically better system. You need to change your culture so it's ready to prioritize learning technology. So what I'd like to do is to really invite all of you to do this on your pitiful situation. Take these columns, you can see, so the 6 columns, the first column is the symptom. Your initial thought as to why you're going to get to the pitiful situation. And then I'd love you to ask why until you run out of steam. It often takes 5 times. Sometimes you can run out of steam at 3, but really ask yourself, is there another why in there? Let me just try that a bit. Even me, as I was doing this, I petered out and then I kept thinking on it. And then eventually I realized I needed 5 to get to the thing you saw. All right, so I'm going to put 5 minutes on my clock. And if you have questions, you're going to send them on text chat and let us know, and we will chime in. Otherwise, we will be quietly waiting as you do the interactive part of this thing and fill it in. I wish I had the spiffy mood music that PJ has. That's some good stuff. We'll have to figure out how to add that. Kelly, no laughing. Why would you have fun? Oh, because it's one of our core values. Never mind. Please.
That's right.
We have about 1 minute left. All right. I realize, Kelly, that I've been failing to do an important part of our shtick here. So quack, quack, quack. Time is up. I quack like a duck when time is up because it's silly, it's fun, and it definitely gets people's attention. So good news, if you didn't finish it, it's okay. You have a chance to do this more at home. The important thing is that you learn the technique. So I would love to check in with people who would like to share one of the chains of reasoning that they went through or how it opened their mind to something.
Doesn't look like we have any takers yet.
Oh, they're very like, I don't want you to know. Do you know how I am the only one that has these problems?
Oh, no.
And I can't let people realize that we are not perfect.
Never,
Ooh, ooh, ooh.
never.
I see a hand. I see a hand.
So that would be
So I figured if no one answered, I would do my own thought process, and some of you will appreciate this. So the worst possible outcome, right? Nobody wants to fund your work, right? Well, why? COVID-19, more urgent needs. People need to eat, people need shelter, people need a lot of things, but why wouldn't people want to fund this work? Well, maybe we're not making our case well enough. But why? Well, because we're so busy doing programs, we don't have time to play marketing and making a video and doing all that stuff. But really, we should focus on that. So then the thought process is, well, maybe we need to do a little less and focus a little bit more on showing our impact. It's not like we don't have qualified people on our board to help us do that. Also, doing a little less is sometimes good in the grand scheme of things. And I think all of you are probably maybe thinking about that now, like what is really the most important thing that we do? Maybe we should focus more on that and work on some other things so that we can survive. And from that, I just got a lot of interesting ideas about what I need to do now going forward. So thank you guys.
Yay!
Anna, thank you.
And the root cause that you found is one that is extremely common, right? I have yet to find an organization that does a premortem that doesn't realize that one of the root causes they need to be most worried about is prioritization. You can be the head of a Fortune 500 corporation, or you can be the head of a 5-person nonprofit or a half a person nonprofit. And it turns out there's always more work than there's time to do. That's an easy thing for us to be in a situation of. Great leaders have to figure out what are the things I spend my limited time on, what's the hard choice of what I say no to. And we can try to do everything, but then we will fail at doing everything as opposed to accomplishing our mission. And so you having the discipline of noticing, great, I love doing the mission work, that's why I'm here. But if nobody knows we're doing the work, then we can't get the funding and we can't do the work, and then the work won't get done. So we have to make sure that we communicate. People can't just trust us, as lovely as we are. They is earned by communicating very effectively. So I love the chain of reasoning that you went through. If anyone can share, if anyone has a heart about doing the 5 whys, other than yourself crazy, channeling your inner 2-year-old, it felt great to finally get a chance to do this. I'm on that. That can be fun. But hopefully you see the chain. So if anyone has any questions, you shoot it to us. Otherwise, I think we can move on to our next section.
Sounds good. And we're there, Paul.
Thank you kindly. And that actually reminds me, let me take a step back and talk about, we've just been walking through this, how you do it on a little bit more detail. What would you be doing at your organization, especially in a distant world, to get that buy-in that we're talking about? So you might give everyone a copy of this Google sheet and they all work on it. And then you have one master one that you put on screen share. And then you sort of call on people and say, you tell me what your top three, pity city things were. You give me your top three. You give me your three. Is there anything anyone had we didn't cover? No? Okay, great. Then on the main one that everyone sees is the stuff that everyone contributed to, and so everyone has a sense of ownership, and you've got a way of putting it all in one place. And with a Google Sheet, they could all be on it and typing at the same time if you wanted to.
I would just like to riff off of that for just 2 seconds and say that if you don't have access to Google Sheets, that's not a problem at all, because you can export it and save it out in any format that works for your organization.
Yeah. Finding tools that let you do this in a way that is going to be compatible with your technology and compatible with the fact that we got to find a way to do things socially distantly. So that's one thing to do. Now, another to collect votes. Now, my brain is melting. Kelly, did we collect votes?
We did not talk about collecting votes.
Great. See, it's as if I did 4 webinars recently. My brain is all melted together. So if you look at the social science, about how people make decisions and how people are influenced, there's some pretty clear results that are astonishing when you realize that almost none of us run our minds accepting those facts. So for instance, as you might have picked up, I'm an extrovert. So when I'm at a meeting, I often dominate the conversation. I at least dominate it over the introverts in the room who, for the love of God, do not want to say any more than they have to. But introverts' ideas are no better or worse than extrovert ideas. But if we have a bunch of them around a table or on a conference call, the normal way we actually make decisions, there's what we think happens, and then there's what really happens. Think happens. We have a forum where we engage in respect, dialogue, and debate, and the best ideas rise to the top. In reality, what we have is a forum where there are certain people that talk louder than others, that have their rhetoric skills. My roommate in college would go on to become a lawyer. I never win an argument with my friend Trevor, ever. It doesn't mean he was right. He's good at arguing. You know what I mean? He's a wicked smart guy, as they say where I'm from, right? So, but that doesn't mean he was right. It just means he's better at arguing. So between the fact that some people are better at rhetoric, some people are extroverted, and what if the boss speaks? If the boss says, I like this idea, human nature being what it is, you're going to be disinclined to disagree with the boss, right? Even if you got a really friendly environment where people are allowed and encouraged to do it, it's just human nature. Oh, the boss believes it. She's probably right. Why am I going to argue about it? She already believes it. So there's just a bunch of things that cause what's called an information cascade, fancy word for you don't learn all the truth that's in the room, but you think you did. You got 10 people in a room and you think you got 10 people's input, but you really had 2 or 3 people's input because everyone else just shut up and listened. So those are real problems. So the way we design our meetings and the way I recommend you use something like this Premortem is to mitigate those problems. And the way you can mitigate is by, again, giving everyone some alone time like we just gave you. Please, everyone, take a minute to fill in Pity City and then wait. And then call on people and don't call on the boss. Call on the boss last. All right, Mary, what were your 3 things? John, what were your 3 things? Carl, what were your 3 things? Does anyone have something unique and different from those things? I don't want to hear repeats. Okay, great, thanks. Juan's got something. Great. Lee's got something. Okay, good. All right, boss, did we miss anything that was on your list? She goes, nope, you guys covered it all. Excellent. You move on. So that's just a technique that I want to make sure you get. You guys are not asking us tons of questions, which means I had extra time. Wahoo! So I get to give you this extra content. So that's a technique to make sure you get as diverse a range of views with as little bit of people stepping on each other as possible. Now, the next technique you want to do is how to get some voting in. Now, one of the reasons why, if you're at a meeting and someone says something and you agree with it, what we've all heard is, I agree with what Paul said, and I would like to elaborate on blah, 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 where they basically re-say what I said, or I re-say what Kelly said. We've all been there. We've all done it. We're human. Okay? It serves a purpose because it lets everyone in the room know that we have consensus, that there's more votes for it. But it just turns out it's a really inefficient way to communicate consensus, and it furthers the whole information cascade that if the extroverts speak up or someone with authority speaks up, it makes it harder and harder to get the diverse views. What if instead you did what we said at first, so you got all the best ideas on the wall, and then you told everyone, on your piece of paper or using a spiffy piece of software, we use a piece of software that lets you do this, which is pretty neat. I want you to vote. Pick your top 3 ideas of the 9 on the board. I want you to pick your top 3, write them down. Give everyone 30 seconds to pick their top 3, and then collect all the votes. Now, because people have already written them down and they're not allowed to change them, guess what? You're going to find out what people really thought. And if you got a piece of software that collects it all anonymously for you, then they don't even have to have the awkwardness of saying something that might be an unpopular view to have, but that people really need to hear. And what happens is at the end of that, you've got this sort of heat map that, you get the 9 things that people listed as likely causes of the failure of the organization, but 2 of them have almost all the votes. And you go, wow, that's a pretty powerful signal, especially if you're the boss. Any of you who've been in a leadership position know that one of your challenges is getting your subordinates to tell you the truth because they're afraid to tell you bad news. It's just human nature. They don't want to tell you bad news. But you really need to know the bad news. This kind of a voting heat map system puts the bad news right there for everyone to see, but no one puts themselves at risk to tell you it, which means you learn the truth, which is what you really want. So that was my fun digression. All right, so now you've gone to Pity City, you've thought about the causes, you've done a 5 whys analysis, and you should have picked your top 3 to 5 risks from the long list that you generated. And so step 4 is, well, now we need to stop this thing from ever happening. This is where we get to this. Again, I'm gonna leverage our last speaker, the smile. How do we get to the other end of the smile so our organization can be resilient and can come out of this stronger than ever? Well, the way we do that is you list the risks down and you brainstorm a bunch of ways to mitigate that risk. Again, have everybody do it, come up with the best, and then vote on the best. So let's walk through the example here. So the top risk for the organization we were talking about before was our culture doesn't prioritize learning technology and didn't think outside the box. That's why it failed. All right, what are some ways we might mitigate that risk? We came up with 5 off the top of our head. The CEO, realizing that it's an existential risk that could kill the entire company and put them in jail, decided that this should be a top priority. They tell everyone, the boss thinks this is the most important thing. Okay, that's an important thing you can do. The CEO could start asking every leader in the organization to create a plan to radically adapt and to do it in 2 weeks, which is approximately 10 times faster than they're used to doing things, to really get the signal home. They could ID in the hundreds of people that work in the organization. Every organization's got the people that love technology and are always in the forefront and trying new things. And then there's the people that are terrified of using anything new, like email. Right, so what if we go find the technology brave folks in the organization, put them into a task force, and if they're sitting at home because they can't go to the facility that we normally run because of social distancing and all that stuff, what are they supposed to be doing with their time? They're now our task force. Their job is to go out, research what problems each of us has, and then go out and bring back technologies for us. Because most of us are really good at our job. Maybe you're really good at helping disabled people learn job skills. It's unrealistic to ask you to also be a wizard of technology. I mean, if you are, that's great, but you shouldn't have to be. You should be great at being the teacher, right? If you're a great CEO, you shouldn't have to necessarily learn all the new technologies. You need to be leading people, right? So find the people that are good at that. Have them come in and interview each of your teams to understand the team's problems, and then have them go out and figure out what some solutions might be and come back with the solutions. You might bring in consultants who are experienced in using technology or in adaptation. And of course, you might regularly connect with the most innovative nonprofits that you know of. And I mean regularly, get together like, all right, this is crazy. Every 2 weeks, we're getting on a conference call and we're going to talk about what was on fire last week and what fire extinguishers did you find to put it out and where can I buy them, right? And if every 2 weeks, you know, people from your organization and a couple sister organizations are talking about the same problems, odds are pretty gosh darn good that some of you are going to find solutions that can help each other. All right, and we could keep going. You can come up with lots and lots of things to try to address this problem, but I think you get the idea. And then you want to repeat this for all of the top priority causes that you identified before. So we're going to give you 5 minutes where I'd love for you to take the top priority problems that you identified in the last section, give them their own section, and then brainstorm ways that you might mitigate it. And really, just open your brain up. It doesn't matter if you think it's foolish. First of all, I can't see the piece of paper that's on your desk. No one's going to know if you wrote down something foolish. So just write it all down, get it out. And I find that foolishness often leads to some really good things. Sorry, Kelly, I talked over you.
I was just going to say, there's no wrong answers. No, it's just, it's from your gut. It's, yeah.
Okay, so we're going to give you 5 minutes, and please start scribbling to your heart's content. If I can find my timer app. There we go. Ta-da. A little under a minute left. The duck has quacked. All right. I can tell it's a shy crowd here in the Berkshires, probably because you don't know us, and I understand. I mean, this is an intimidating guy with the Garfield and all. I understand. If any of you would be up for sharing some of the techniques you came up with or had any clarifying questions on how to do that well, please shout now. Otherwise, we will steam on to the next area. But we would much rather engage with you around the questions you have so you can do this very effectively with your peers at home. All right, I'm sensing people are pretty comfortable talking to their pads of paper, and they don't want everyone to know about the stuff that's going on. Okay, I have a trick. I'm going to come back to that. So I would like to ask, it's all top secret. Excellent. Yes, I see that in the chat. I'm going to try to make this more comfortable for everybody. We deliberately asked you to fill this in for your organization because we wanted it to be really relevant to you and not a theoretical academic exercise. Now that you've done that, I'm going to ask you to take a step back and we're going to sort of speed through and say, I'd like you to think about the nonprofit community of the Berkshires, of which you are the leaders. Okay, so that is the entity, the effort that we're talking about. It's 2 years from now, and the environment is as I described it, COVID, ugly. Pity City, again, state funding cut, foundation funding dramatically cut because they're spending a bunch of the money on other things. Social distancing, all that stuff is in place. So what is your situation? Lots of nonprofits are going to close. In this situation that we are imagining in the future, again, we are not predicting doom and gloom. We are looking at a doomy and gloomy future so that we do not get there.
That's right.
So here we are, and I'm imagining that the nonprofit community of the Berkshires has been decimated 2 years from now because it just was unable to adapt. So I would like all of you to just take a moment and think about what are the root causes. Do a little Kelly, could we scroll back up to the 5 whys section?
Yep.
Thank you. I'd like you to take a few moments to write down why is the nonprofit community of the Berkshires in trouble? That way I can ask you and you can feel a little more comfortable sharing it. So let's give you a few minutes to fill that in and then we'll come back and ask you some more. A little bit less than a minute left. Quack, 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 quack. All right. So as people who care deeply about the nonprofit community of the Berkshires and all the people that you serve, this is a wonderful opportunity for you to help each other identify major risks and maybe come up with some ways of dealing with it. Does anyone have some common problems that they would like to share?
So I see one in the chat. I think you see it as well, Paul.
Think so.
So we're
We're
going
going to have to get, sorry, go ahead, Kelly.
Yep, you're right. We're going to have to get better at sharing resources so we can reduce our expenses. I hope we can help with that. Need a good model, or we'll have to create one.
Yeah, and you know, part of the challenges, thank you very much, Liana. So one of the things I have seen is that the way foundations and government agencies have liked to fund things in the past, they essentially required a lot of redundancy in nonprofits. And they would penalize you if you tried to consolidate things. But now, all of them have less money, and they need to have those dollars stretch and do more, which means you have permission to do things that weren't possible before. So it's great for you to take a look at the different ways that you guys have costs and what might be some ways that you can collaborate and reduce some of those costs. One of you probably has a great finance department, and 3 of you are in basically the exact same business, but in different towns, right? Maybe there's a smart way to consolidate some of those costs. Or if you group together and buy, whether it's software, materials, whatever, if you go from being one, $100,000 a year nonprofit, no one's paying attention to you, to now you are this buying block of $100 million a year of stuff, people pay attention to you. So it's just a bunch of tricks like that if you start talking to each other, you can probably leverage. And I think there's more stuff, Kelly.
Yeah, so there's one question that came in through the Q&A that there are too many organizations and too few funders.
Right, and again, that gets to the funders like to fund their own little things, right? Everyone wants to fund the thing in their backyard, or there's the board of directors that, well, I'm on the board of this thing, and it might make sense for my nonprofit to merge with your nonprofit if we were businesses, I would do that yesterday, but as a nonprofit person, the only thing I get paid is the ego of sitting on your board. And if I merge with this other entity, am I going to get the same ego? So I'm just being real practical here. There's some real challenges about understanding what needs to happen. But in a time of this much crisis, it creates the opportunity to do what was not possible before, to have candid conversations with funders, because sometimes you need the funders to apply the pressure so that certain board members or other funders can come along. Sometimes you need your board to be the pressure to the funders to say, look, do you want these human services to be delivered or not? Do you want these art services to be delivered? Then you've got to let us do the smart thing. So that's a lot of dialogue you got to have with each other to identify what the opportunities are. If I did not answer that question, please let us know in chat so we can elaborate properly. Kelly, what's next?
Absolutely. And there is another comment from Judith that we have to think of ways to keep our names before the public. So marketing. Yeah,
and again, marketing is really hard. Communication, a friend of mine was recently telling me how communication is the hardest thing. She's laughing, in fact, right now. So I'm stealing her line from a private conversation. Communication is the hardest gosh darn thing. And if you're really good at delivering your service, you're usually not really good at communication. And so maybe a bunch of you banding together to find a firm or someone who is good at communication, who can come in and know, oh, I've got 10 arts organizations doing similar kinds of things. That means that instead of me doing a custom job for each of you and charging you a lot of money, which you can't afford, I can do the same kind of a thing, but with your content in it. And because you're all buying together, I can give you a further discount. So there's a bunch of clever things you can do so you can make sure you get your story out. We all know of the organizations that get the money that don't do great work, but they're really good at PR. Imagine if the people that do great work get the right PR so that they can get the funding and keep doing that great work.
That's right. And I think that those were all of the questions. I do see a comment from Liana to the group, but that went out to the attendees as well. So.
Ooh,
Lots of good programming coming, which is absolutely fantastic.
I'm sensing a tease there. Very nice.
Very good.
Stay tuned.
No rest for the
Okay.
weary. That's right.
Exactly. All right. So the last two chunks of our session today. First is I'd like you to think about, now that you've got this tool, you've run through it both for yourself and sort of thinking about broader the entire community of the nonprofits of the Berkshires and in fact the people of the Berkshires. How can this tool be helpful to you? We would just love to hear if anyone, like, they can imagine, wow, if I did this at my organization, this is how it would help me. Or I'm interested in doing this in my organization. I'm not the CEO. How am I going to convince the CEO to do it? Anything like that. Help us understand your questions around how can you get something like this that you could work with you. Again, you can just download our form for free and use it. We're not saying to hire us. We're happy to help someone with a facilitated one, but you can just take this template and work with it. We didn't invent a Premortem. It was invented, so far as I can tell, by Harvard, who kindly open sourced it. We've just streamlined it, try to make it fill in the blank and easy. So if you have questions about that, or you have ideas of how you can deploy it, we'd love to hear from you. Let's give you a few moments to type. My rule is 7 seconds of silence means we're good. So y'all are a quiet bunch. Very good. It's because these foreigners from the Pioneer Valley here, I understand. All right, good. So that's what, so some things that other folks have told us is how this is important is, again, that medium-sized nonprofit we work with, the boss already knew what the answer was, but he needed everyone in the organization to believe it. And by the end of that half day, all the senior leadership was on board. And now they're trying to think about how do they replicate the activity. Each of them needs to go to their division of the company and run the Premortem for their division, not for the whole company, so that everyone's there, because everyone in the organization needs to understand it can't be like it was. They need everybody rowing in the same direction, trying to think innovatively. Because if you don't tell people, then they won't adapt. They'll be like, why are you making me do all these things that are uncomfortable? Don't you know it's all going to go back to the way it was? And then you're stuck in this frustrating situation with your employees. Sorry, Kelly, I can see you're trying to say something.
So you have a question. So this exercise is great when we stop to organize it. How do you recommend that we implement these types of processes regularly in our business? With the example, how do I train my team of 5 or train my team to use the 5 whys throughout the work week as part of their approach to work? That's another great question.
Oh, that is great, PJ. So this is much like postmortems. I recommend that you do a simple training. Everyone does one of these things, and you build it into your toolbox. So for instance, any organization I've been involved with, it was understood that when we were done with a project, we did a postmortem.
That's right.
Always built in. We had the document ready to go. We'd take a little break. We'd go to the bar afterwards. We'd get, I mostly drink water, but it was all about the cheesy fries for me. That was my vice of choice. So I got my stack of cheesy fries. Everyone else got their beers. And then we pulled out and we did the postmortem. And that was just a part of our culture. It took us 15 to 30 minutes and we learned so much and got better from it. Likewise, on premortems, anytime we're going to start a new project that we thought was really important, it was just a part of our design process that after we had thought through what it was going to be, we'd run a premortem on it. In many cases, you can do it in 90 minutes if it's a smaller project. If it's something major like, is our organization going to survive COVID, you might want to set a half a day aside. But once you build it into your template of tasks, like whenever we're going to start a new project, we always do X, Y, and Z. I would say train people on a premortem, and then they're all going to realize, yeah, that's a good thing to do, and then put it in your template of tasks. That's what I do. That's what I've done elsewhere, and it's worked really well for us. God praise templates. If it weren't for templates, I'd never remember anything, and that's why I have them.
That's right.
Templates allow me to simulate competency. It's truly impressive. Other people don't even know. He knows what he's doing. He has a cheat sheet, and he uses it. You too can have a cheat sheet.
So, so Leanna was asking that it seems like the more folks in the Premortem, the more you would get out of it.
Yeah, as a general rule, yes. And while you could think that there's some diminishing returns, again, if you notice the sort of structure we said where everyone does it, we did one where there were 12 senior leaders. Now, just imagine a table with 12 senior leaders and 2 consultants there, and you're walking through all these questions, but you're doing it the old way of talking about every single one. How many days would that take, right? Days it would take. And you'd probably be down to like 9 senior leaders because some of them are dead or quit just because of fighting. Everyone's going to be upset. With this technique, what's great is that you can get the opinions of all the people, but because I said person 1, person 2, person 3, giving you unique things, if anyone else has something unique to add, okay, 1 or 2 more people say some things, maybe a 3rd person, let's vote, we're done, we moved on. What that does is it lets you get the voice of everyone. So A, you learn from more people, and B, more people have ownership. Because we all know if people contribute to the thing, that's the IKEA principle, right? Why do we love our IKEA furniture? Because otherwise, how do we justify all the time we spent building it? So if they helped build the thing, it wasn't a diktat from the great leader, then they're going to be much more committed. So these definitely work with more people involved. Largest I've done is, north of a dozen or so. I don't know what happens if you have 100, so please don't ask me. I definitely recommend up to a dozen or so. It's a great thing.
And there was a comment earlier that rather than a template, just making it part of the project brief, which is a great idea.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, anything else? Any other questions before we move into our wrap up? We're looking good. Okay, great. Kelly, would you mind pulling up a list of our virtual offerings, please? So I hope that what you've gotten here is a nice taste of Innovation Accelerator's culture, right? We are fun, we are fast, and we're all about adaptation and innovation because we want to have a big impact in the world. One of our core values is fun, you heard earlier. One of the other ones is ambition for benevolent world domination. So whatever the thing it is you want to do, how can we help you think about how to add a 0, 2, 3 zeros to the number of people that you're impacting, the amount of good that you're doing in the world? The concepts that work for the startup world absolutely work for the nonprofit world. I find they often work better. So we have a couple tools in our toolbox that people tend to like. You've now got a taste for the Premortem. When we do these are usually about a half a day. We also have an idea jam, which is, hey, we've determined that we want to solve a problem, but we don't know how to go about solving. We want to come up with ideas for how to do it. We want to have a really good system for coming up with good ideas that leverage all the brains and then figuring out which of those ideas are the right ones to focus our energy and effort on. So those are our idea jams. They're a blast. And then there's our flagship product, which is our accelerator. The accelerator is a multi-month training program where you come in with an idea, and at the end, you have systematically ripped that idea to pieces, built the business model around it, got it in front of customers, and you are literally presenting in front of panels of angel investors, venture capitalists, foundation executives, and seasoned executives in a number of other fields, saying, this is my idea. Here is my evidence that it's not just an idea, that it can work. Here's all the stuff I have learned, and this is what I can do with a seed grant of $250,000. Can you connect me to the people that would be excited about funding it? And we have had the pleasure of doing this for 5 cohorts of nonprofits so far, and it's just an absolute delight to see the kinds of results. My favorite one is Pathlight, a nonprofit that helps the intellectually disabled lead independent lives. They're based in Western Mass. They saw a chronic problem of child abuse of the intellectually disabled kids they serve, and they wanted to protect those kids, but there was no good curriculum. So they invented their own, and it worked good in their facilities, and they're wondering, can they turn it into something more? They used our class to figure out, could we turn this into an online curriculum that we could sell? And at the end of 6 months, they had a prototype. They pitched to a group of funders, and they raised $250,000 on graduation night. They then, a year later, launched the pilot with 5 school systems. And then the year after that, they were in negotiations with a large city that I cannot name on a public channel, but they're in negotiation with a large city to adopt their curriculum. And they are now on track to launching a business that will help protect millions of children around the country and bring millions of dollars of funding into their beautiful nonprofit to let them do more work. So those are the kind of things that get Kelly and I really excited and motivated us. So if you will follow up on our website, we're going to give you the link to the Contact Us page. If you would like the template that we walked through today, just give us your email address and we will send that to you absolutely free of charge. And if you have any questions, we're happy to follow up with you. And I think that covers everything on my list. Kelly, is there anything else on yours?
There's nothing else on mine. I did put the link in the chat. So it was just such a pleasure to be here. And I hope that folks are able to get outside and enjoy the beautiful, beautiful day.
Thank you both so much.